Community consensus about William Afton's death status has done a bit of flip-flopping over the years. When Pizzeria Simulator and Ultimate Custom Night came out, it was assumed that William Afton was finally defeated, so when Help Wanted came out, the prevailing theory was that Glitchtrap was some sort of digital replica of William Afton's mind. This changed when Security Breach came out and introduced Burntrap in the remains of the Pizzeria Simulator location, and everyone had to wrap their heads around the idea that William managed to survive. Then the Tales from the Pizzaplex books introduced the Mimic, and people started to theorize that Burntrap and Glitchtrap weren't William at all, but rather this new villain who ended up making an appearance in Security Breach's Ruin DLC. Finally, Help Wanted 2 came out, and while some people thought it proved that the Mimic was Glitchtrap, others believed it proved the exact opposite. So which is it? Is William still around, or was everything the Mimic all along? Well, stay tuned to find out, because I'm going to explain just what evidence is really there to back these theories, and what the answer means for the future of the series. The first thing I want to clarify before going into the main evidence is that even if the Burntrap ending was not the canon ending of Security Breach, that doesn't mean that the information in it is completely irrelevant, or that characters in it like Burntrap don't canonically exist. I've seen quite a few people suggest that Gregory drawing the endings means that everything in those endings not only didn't happen, but are 100% fabricated by Gregory, with the only things that have any relevance being outside of those endings. The issue with this is that we don't know the real reason why or how much of reality these drawings were based on. He drew the blob after all, and we see that in the beginning of Ruin. We also see the charging pod Burntrap was in during Ruin, and while it's empty by that point, that definitely doesn't mean he was never there. Even if the Burntrap ending didn't happen, it was still included for a reason, just like Sister Location's non-canon ending with the private room showing the FNAF 4 environments. Even if that ending didn't happen, that doesn't mean that the things in that ending are completely irrelevant or don't exist. The way I see it, each of those endings are things that could have happened, though for Security Breach specifically, I have a somewhat different idea of what I think happened that I go over in one of my previous videos, and as such, everything in those endings would canonically exist, provided the circumstances for their existence were met. Therefore, I'm pretty sure that regardless of Security Breach's ending, Burntrap did in fact exist. Now, the state he's in as of the latest point in the timeline is largely dependent on whether or not he is William Afton or if he's just the Mimic. But speaking of timelines, this adorable plushie you see before you, who I promise is not a Mimic, is only available for about 1 more week as of the release of this video. So if you want one, make sure to head to the link in the description and pin comment as soon as possible so that you don't miss out on the chance. If the plushie reaches at least 400 sold, I plan to stream myself playing Security Breach, so if you would like an emotional support plushie to rant to when the next game disproves something we all thought made complete sense, and or want to watch me fend off my fear of getting jump scared live on stream, consider checking it out. But as for the whole William versus Mimic thing, the community seems pretty split on William's involvement in the recent games, and whether or not he was around at all. After all, would it even make sense for William to come back, what with the ending of Pizzeria Simulator and the events of Ultimate Custom Night? Pizzeria Simulator was all about putting the past to rest, quite specifically including William, and Ultimate Custom Night was him facing an unending punishment in purgatory for his sins, so it wouldn't make sense for him to come back, right? Well, it wouldn't if that's what was really happening. The thing is, while the Pizzeria Simulator location was set on fire to bring everything to an end, we can pretty clearly see that it wasn't successful. It temporarily stopped Fazbear Entertainment, but the company came back bigger and better than ever. It temporarily stopped the tragedies, but once again people are going missing. It may have been intended to destroy everything inside, but while it's worse for wear, the building itself is the hidden foundation for everything going wrong with Fazbear Entertainment now. While fire was assumed by characters to be able to destroy Remnant and force spirits to move on, this was always just a theory even for the characters in-universe, and was technically shown to not be the case all the way back in FNAF 3. Despite the location being burned down, unless Happiest Day happens, the fire doesn't release the souls from the animatronics, as shown by their eyes being lit in the game's bad ending. As for Ultimate Custom Night, while it was initially theorized to be William being trapped in some sort of purgatory as he faced the consequences of his actions, we've since had some pretty strong indications that Ultimate Custom Night wasn't any form of permanent afterlife at all. While the Fazbear Frights books may not be in the same timeline as the games, as there are various elements of it that contradict the game continuity, there are overlapping characters and event parallels, with Ultimate Custom Night seeming to be one of them. In the stories, William Afton is forcefully kept alive after the fire and kept in a nightmare coma by the vengeful spirit of one of the kids he killed. Meanwhile, in Ultimate Custom Night, we hear about a vengeful spirit who's refusing to rest, and forcing William into facing what could pretty easily be described as nightmare scenarios. Not only that, but in Frights, the nightmare coma wasn't permanent, and William went on to cause even more problems than he would have otherwise after making his escape. As such, ruling out the possibility of William's ability to be around in some form because of the fire or Ultimate Custom Night doesn't exactly hold up when we know it's possible for different events to occur. It would even make sense given the themes we see demonstrated throughout the games. games. While I go into more detail in my last full-length video, one trend in FNAF seems to be revenge going wrong or making things worse. So it would make sense if the Vengeful Spirit's plan for revenge ended up backfiring, keeping William around longer instead of allowing him to die. So if it's possible for William to escape Ultimate Custom Night, does the evidence from Help Wanted onward really indicate that? Or does it make more sense for the Mimic to have been the one pulling the strings? Well, recently it seems that the argument in favor of William being gone, with the Mimic being Glitchtrap and Burntrap copying William, has taken center stage. And the reasoning is understandable. For one thing, when Glitchtrap first appears in Help Wanted, it plays back audio from Tape Girl's logs, which could be considered mimicry. It also has streaks of moisture falling from its eyes and mouth, which many have pointed to as connecting back to how in the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, the Mimic saw its creator crying and frothing at the mouth. Additionally, Glitchtrap's design is reminiscent of Spring Bonnie, but it has a more handmade look to it, just like what we see the Mimic use in Ruin and read about in Tales. We also know from Tales that the Mimic 1 program was used for story generation in Fazbear Entertainment's games, including the VR ones. On top of all this, the ending of Help Wanted 2, where we end up giving Cassie the Vanny mask, is labeled Help Trap in the files, and Mimic is able to hijack the helpy function of the Vanny mask to lure Cassie to it. So when Help Wanted 2 came out and Glitchtrap came out of a charging pod in a way reminiscent of Burntrap, many took this as confirmation that the Mimic was both Glitchtrap and Burntrap, having mimicked William Afton. But as you can probably tell from the length of this video, I don't think it's quite that simple. I will say, I think the evidence for Mimic being involved with Glitchtrap is pretty solid. I personally can't think of a different explanation for things like the tears or the fabric costume design of his outfit, and it would explain why it was able to access the Vanny network through Helpy and Ruin, as Glitchtrap is pretty strongly tied to Vanny the person and was spread throughout everything's systems. However, there are a few things that make me think that the Mimic can't be the full story there. For one thing, the Mimic's program was used for games in a completely official capacity for story generation up through the beginnings of the Pizzaplex based on Tales. Yet in Help Wanted, we find out from Tape Girl that Glitchtrap originated from old circuit boards they had been given to help them program pathfinding, and that those circuit boards ended up getting stolen from them. If it was the Mimic 1 program on those boards, why use them for pathfinding instead of story generation, and why would they be stolen back? Fazbear Entertainment would have likely had plenty of copies of the code to use, so those specific circuit boards were likely special. Glitchtrap actively wanting to download itself into a human mind is also quite strange in the context of the Mimic. Where would it have copied this motive and ability? Not from William, since he's never shown to do this anywhere previous. And on that note, in every confirmed instance we see of it, the Mimic is never once shown to have any interest in copying William Afton, especially not long term. Even if it had seen William at some point in the past and copied some element of his behavior, it would be rather out of character for it to go into full-blown Afton impersonation mode, as it very much did not do that at any point after it would have theoretically been aware of William in the books, either at the time of William's murders or after being exposed to the events we see in VR. When we get its point of view in the books, it's pretty clear it's simply following its program to the best of its understanding, and it's more than happy to swap between the costumes in the area. The only preferred avatar it ever showed was that of a white tiger, linking back to elements of its origin story, and even then it does just fine manifesting in the AR world as plenty of other things. And given that story takes place in the completed Pizzaplex, it would be taking place well after Glitchtrap came into existence in VR. Meanwhile, Glitchtrap seems perfectly happy to be just the rabbit. It appears as one in VR, has Vanny make a rabbit costume, shows up as a weird rabbit monster in Princess Quest, and it represents itself consistently as a rabbit when making appearances and corrupting files in Help Wanted 2. Anytime Glitchtrap is involved with a different form, it seems to just be because it's taking control of something pre-existing to make use of it, like with the Glamrock animatronics in Security Breach and the Helpy program in Help Wanted 2. Even the playback of Tape Girl's audio could be explained not as mimicry, but because we learned from Tape Girl that Glitchtrap attached itself to her recordings. There isn't any point where it's confirmed that Glitchtrap is copying anything else outside of it just hijacking something that's already there, which would be strange if it was only the Mimic, which mimics things, at play. And this doesn't even get into the other evidence that Glitchtrap would have elements of the real William involved. When the Glitchtrap virus takes over the animatronics in FNAF AR, Springtrap says lines that Nightmare says to William in Ultimate Custom Night, which the Mimic never would have been aware of. Similarly, in Princess Quest, Glitchtrap's message translates to "I always come back," William Afton's signature catchphrase, which the Mimic never would have had the chance to hear. Glitchtrap is even associated with William's symbolic color of purple in his typical avatar, his appearance in Princess Quest, and when he's corrupting things in Help Wanted 2. And speaking of Help Wanted 2, the memory plushies you have to obtain from Glitchtrap in order to reach Princess Quest 4 and allow Vanny to destroy him are of the 5 original animatronics and the puppet, William's victims. Even if the Mimic had somehow seen the missing children incident, he wouldn't have seen Charlie's death that led her to become the puppet. So if Glitchtrap was just the Mimic, why would he have that memory of Charlie? So while I do think the Mimic is involved, I don't think Glitchtrap could have formed from just the Mimic on its own. Not with how it would have needed something to keep it so attached to the William persona and how much point points to William being there as well. Not to mention, in order to beat Princess Quest 3 and release Vanny from Glitchtrap's control, you need to find the green rabbit plush you receive after successfully getting hijacked by Glitchtrap and Help Wanted, and a Vanny mask like the one received through the Curse of Dreadbear DLC. Both of these obviously connect to Glitchtrap, but I think it's interesting that one is a green rabbit, which is how Springtrap is often described, and the other is what the Mimic is connected to enough to hijack and ruin. Two items, two forces at play inside Glitchtrap, both William Afton and the Mimic. But if William is involved with Glitchtrap, how much is William involved? And how would it have happened when he had been pretty stuck in Ultimate Custom Night? Well, I think the answer to this question can be found thanks to a few different things. For one, we have the Princess Quest series tying in a lot to Golden Freddy and Ultimate Custom Night. For example, originally in the files, the princess was named Cassidy, which based on the survival logbook is the name of one of the spirits William killed and likely the one in Golden Freddy. The princess is also gold in color and has a shadow form, just like Golden Freddy and Shadow Freddy. There's a Chica head watching in the background of Princess Quest 3, possibly hinting to how in Ultimate Custom Night Withered Chica says she saw everything. There's hidden code in the files that translates to "it's me," and most notably, Help Wanted 2's code confirms that this guy in Princess Quest 2 telling the princess it's time to sleep is none other than Old Man Consequences, the very same entity who told Golden Freddy to rest in Ultimate Custom Night. Only in Princess Quest, the princess doesn't rest, and Princess Quest 2 leads into Princess Quest 3, which bears striking similarities to Help Wanted. One could argue that the name being removed means that the character isn't meant to have that representation anymore, but I don't think that's the case. We don't know the intentions behind the name removal, and I think it's pretty likely that it was removed to avoid officially canonizing the name of the spirit based on just how much points to this being the spirit of Golden Freddy and this game being the aftermath of Ultimate Custom Night. Personally, I don't see why any of this would be the case unless the spirit of Golden Freddy was still around and actively trying to stop the actual William Afton. After all, if the real thing wasn't involved, wouldn't the Vengeful Spirit still be an Ultimate Custom Night instead of trying to stop Glitchtrap from inside Princess Quest? Why would the spirit care if the murderer himself was right where they wanted him to be? What makes the most sense to me is that when the old pathfinding circuit boards were scanned into Help Wanted, some of the code that was either connected to William or had some of William's remnant or agony attached is what got uploaded, and that gave William the opportunity to latch on and pull himself out of Ultimate Custom Night. Meanwhile, the Vengeful Spirit had attached to William and got pulled along for the ride. However, I don't exactly think William's spirit is in Glitchtrap. After all, the cut lines left behind in Help Wanted 2 differentiate between Glitchtrap and William in a sense. It implies that the memories are Glitchtrap's and that it's bound to the past through them, but it mentions that a small piece of his code remains, while seeming to refer to Glitchtrap as an it throughout the rest of that line. Therefore, I think that a part of his code, William's code, as well as some of William's memories, were used to make Glitchtrap what it was. However, with the end of Help Wanted 2's Princess Quest ending, we presumably have William's code and influence destroyed. This would leave just the Mimic behind, possibly explaining why the Mimic seems to be the one operating in ruin. This would mean that while William probably was part of Glitchtrap, he wouldn't really be anymore unless the Princess Quest ending didn't happen. But what about Burntrap? While yes, Burntrap and the Mimic have different designs, some have argued that it's the result of either Steelwool retconning Burntrap after his poor reception at the end of Security Breach, and or that it's related to the Mimic's ability to shift the location of its endoparts to fit into different mascot costumes. Many have also pointed to how the Mimic does have a hand that has a near identical structure to Burntrap's, and suggest that the reddish marks on the Mimic's hand match up with where the corpse was on Burntrap. And of course, we can't forget, both the Mimic and Burntrap hold their arms in a somewhat bent position that would come from how the Mimic copied the pose from a kid holding a plushie in its origin story. So case closed, right? William's dead and the Mimic sweeps the competition? Well, not exactly. After all, if Steelwool really wanted to retcon Burntrap's design, why would they reaffirm it through Gregory's drawing of him in the very same DLC? Wouldn't they have had him draw something that looked more like the Mimic? And as much as part shifting could account for some differences, there's a distinct difference between moving around the location of specific parts and swapping out an entire endoskeleton, especially when they could have easily kept most of Burntrap's model, subtracted the corpse and casing, and called it a day. After all, parts of Burntrap himself were made from the Spring Bonnie model that was initially made for Help Wanted, so we know Steelwool is willing to reuse models to connect characters visually. Why not do the same with the Mimic and Burntrap to make sure people knew they were meant to be the same character? Instead, pretty much every distinction that could be made between Burntrap and the Mimic seems to be made. Burntrap has black eyes that glow purple, a color associated with William Afton, while the Mimics are white glowing orange. While the Mimic in the books had antennae that were pointed to as being another connection between it and Burntrap, the version we see see in Ruin doesn't have them at all, potentially implying that it's a deliberate separation. The Mimic in the books and the games took the strategy of luring and chasing to catch its victims, but Burntrap appears to use Glitchtrap to hijack Freddy and the Glamrock animatronics instead. Even the hand that people point to as having the red marks correlating to Burntrap's corpse doesn't actually match up in many locations. And that's not even touching on how Burntrap's design includes human bones in place of fingers, general organ shenaniganery, and pretty noticeable spring body elements in the burnt bolted down casing and spring-locked torso and shoulders. Now, Burntrap's design isn't a perfect match to Scraptrap, but it does look a good deal more like him, or at least a version of him that was set on fire and had repairs made by Vanny, than it does the Mimic. Even ignoring the difference in mechanical parts, the only way for the Mimic to have physically been Burntrap would be if it had first found a corpse to wear, replaced several of its fingers with human bones, managed to cram a skull over its head without it breaking, and bolted down the spring body suit parts that, given the location, most likely would have come from William, which probably would have had the end result of William possessing Burntrap anyway. Then, after the main events of Security Breach, the Mimic would have had to somehow unbolt the parts, remove them, and replace its fingers. It just seems unlikely. As for the argument that they have to be the same because they hold their arms in a similar pose, with Burntrap it's either a case where he's pushing open a door and pulling his arm back, or he's trying to run, which makes the bent, swaying arm not strange at all. Not to mention, the positioning of his arm is more held in front of him than in a position where he's holding a plushie against his chest. Meanwhile, even the Mimic endo seems as though it doesn't particularly care about keeping its arm clutched to its chest. While people have pointed to a frame where it looks like the Mimic has its arm bent similarly to how Burntrap had it, based on the positioning of its other arm, it looks like it's a mid-walk, run, or twisting movement. And even then, it doesn't do anything like that for pretty much the entirety of its chase in Ruin, as far as I can tell. Instead, just keeping its arms out by its sides. Even if the arm pose was something highlighted in the game, it's still a pretty shaky piece of evidence since it's not exactly an uncommon way to have your arm for brief amounts of time. Technically, based solely on this, you could argue that Aunt Jane in the FNAF movie is a Mimic, but this wouldn't make logical sense as there isn't anything else to connect the two. Burntrap looks like what you would get if you set Springtrap on fire repeatedly and made repairs as necessary. He has purple eyes and emerges in a cloud of purple smoke. He's made out to be a big reveal along with the surviving Pizzeria simulator location, which wouldn't really be satisfying if he was just some new character that hadn't even been introduced in the books. On top of this, as much as many use the argument of Glitchtrap emerging from a charging pod in Help Wanted 2 as evidence that Burntrap is the Mimic, I'd say it actually proves the opposite, as what makes Glitchtrap instead of the Mimic is the influence of William Afton. Because of all this, I think it makes the most sense that William was able to use the code uploaded into Help Wanted 2 to escape from Ultimate Custom Night and create Glitchtrap, but his actual spirit was still in his body. So he had to use Glitchtrap in order to do what he wanted on the surface, and what we see of Burntrap in Security Breach is him having Vanny try to repair the body his spirit was still stuck in. While it may be disappointing for some people, I think narratively it makes a good amount of sense. Henry tried to destroy the past. He wanted it to be forgotten, and in a way it was. However, by allowing the past to be forgotten, all that did was allow for it to return. The franchise, bigger and better than ever, built literally and figuratively on top of the failed attempt to destroy William Afton. But of course, Burntrap then gets yoinked by the Blob, or the Tingle if you want to call it that, at the end of the Burntrap ending. And since Gregory draws that, and his charging pod is empty in Ruin with a big point being made about the Blob making its escape, my guess is that currently William may be inside the Blob. Honestly, this could potentially connect to the books even more if William takes it over, just like he does with the Agony amalgamation he controlled briefly in Fazbear Frights. So is William Afton still around? I think it's quite possible. While he would have formerly been Glitchtrap and Burntrap and probably isn't there anymore, I definitely wouldn't rule out him making another appearance. After all, he always comes back. But hey, if you have any thoughts on my ideas, feel free to share them in the comments. I may not respond to all of them, but I will read them all when I can. And for anyone interested, don't forget to check out the link for the makeshift plushie, or even just subscribe. I've got some fun stuff planned, and I hope you all enjoy it. With all that said, don't get stabbed and have a nice day.